Need for Speed The Run, the final game made by EA Studio Black Box Interactive, developers of the legendary games like Need for Speed Most Wanted, 2005 and NFS Carbon. However, from their future endeavors, it was pretty clear that Black Box Interactive wanted to pivot from what they had made before and foray into something new, foray into the uncharted, and make a unique game unlike anything else in the genre. And Need for Speed The Run is a byproduct of that journey. It is a very unique game which was widely misunderstood at launch, but all these years later, fans have come to love this game and appreciate it for what it is. Something that pivots away from the typicality of its genre and tries something new. This is Need for Speed The Run 13 years later, and we're gonna take a look at this legendary racer and what made it so unique and so good, and how at the same time it resulted in the disbandment of an entire studio. And as always guys, if you enjoy the video, then please like and subscribe to the channel, as less than 1% of the people watching are actually subscribed, and I would love to have you on this journey with me. So first of all, let's begin with the story and the setting of NFS The Run. We follow Jack, who is an experienced street racer, but he finds himself in trouble, like serious trouble with the mob due to a massive debt that he owes them. After he narrowly escapes from being crushed within his car at a scrapyard in Oakland due to his failure to repay the debt, he then proceeds to seek help from his friend Sam, who is a fixer, and she arranges for him to take part in this massive race from San Francisco to New York City, which is more than 190 miles of asphalt. The race's cash pot is of over $25 million, which would be a lot of money for both Sam and Jack if he manages to win. Honestly, Need for Speed The Run is basically what a racing game would look like if it was a movie. The entire game is full of scripted events, whether it be cutscenes or set pieces which take place during the races themselves. Most of the racing games from the early 2010s featured an open world with a lot of generic races, and after which you used to fight certain bosses. And that was fun, I am not denying it. But Need for Speed The Run does something completely different. The entire game is just one big massive race of over 300 kilometers, and that entire race is broken down into pieces and smaller events which we take part in. Jack is a likable character, and although sometimes his overconfidence can come off as arrogant or even ignorant of his surroundings, at the end of the day he still comes off as a somewhat adorable dork who is really good at racing and a bit overconfident. One of the biggest grievances with NFS The Run was that it's a game which is barely a length of 5 to 6 hours in its playthrough, and asking $60 for a 5-hour game is asking for a lot, right? But what The Run lacks in quantity, it makes for in quality. As you race from San Francisco to New York, you will come across various districts of the US, Las Vegas, the Plains, as well as Chicago. So you're going to a lot of places. There is a lot of variety, whether it be deserts, snow areas, forests. There's just a lot to see here and a lot to enjoy. So NFS The Run definitely doesn't skimp out when it comes to the environment design. And speaking of that, the graphics still hold up to this date. The Run was the first game to use EA's in-house engine Frostbite, and it uses the second iteration of Frostbite engine, which honestly still holds up to this day. I'm playing this game at 1440p ultra settings, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. It doesn't look like a current gen game, but it definitely looks like a remaster of a previous gen game. It's that good. Also, the entire time, the landscape and the areas around you change. Like when you're driving on the highway, you can see lots of fields around you, an airplane soaring in the sky, and then suddenly you're in a snowy hilltop area, going from one canyon to another, racing downhill. It's all really good, and there are a ton of set pieces and scripted moments in the story which offer adrenaline pumping, high octane action which I dare not spoil for you. Honestly, if you own this game, you can no longer buy this game, but if you own this game and if you didn't give it a try back in the day, I would say definitely boot it up. It's just gonna take maybe a weekend for you. It's barely 5 hours and you're gonna enjoy a lot of scripted events, the like of which we haven't really seen in racing games even till now. Credit where it's due, I have to praise Black Box Interactive for incorporating so many real-world locations into this game and actually making them look different from each other. Remember, this game came in 2011 and Black Box Interactive actually went ahead and made different assets for different cities, because San Francisco looks completely different from Las Vegas, which looks completely different from New York. The desert areas as well as the snowy highways all look completely different from each other. So creating so many assets and so many variations in environment design for a single game, that's a lot. And like I said, what the run lacks in quantity, it's just a 5-hour game, it definitely more than enough makes for in quality. Even as you race from one district to another and you take in all the different biomes and the different environments, and even in the same district, if you're going from one desert highway to another, the road changes. You can come across desert sandstorms, and which completely change the experience as compared to racing on a clear desert road. When you're drifting down snowy mountains and your kart starts to oversteer, it's a different feeling when you're racing in the middle of woodlands with forests and looking for shortcuts. So there is a lot to see here, and there are a lot of real world locations which you can enjoy, especially if you live in the US or if you have been to the US. So that is really commendable. Moving on to the gameplay section, and Need for Speed The Run basically has 4 types of races. But before I talk about that, I would actually like to talk about the cars in the game and the handling. So EA Black Box advertised the driving model of the game as sitting somewhere between Need for Speed Shift and Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, saying it's not as arcadey as Hot Pursuit, but neither is it as hardcore simulation as Need for Speed The Shift. The run employs a large range of real-world vehicles, but something that might turn a lot of people off is that there is no car customization in this game. And yes, I would love car customization too, it's simply not in this game, and it is what it is, guys. I think this was not the focus for EA Black Box, and looking at how much budget and resources that must have gone into just creating the design and environment of this world, I can understand that there is no car customization. But even though there is no car customization, the car driving and handling is absolutely awesome. The car sounds are different. A muscle car is gonna sound different from modern sports car, and this isn't something that you used to see back into the early 2010s. Another thing that I really appreciate in this game is that unlike most modern Need for Speed games, where the cars feel really floaty to drive and don't actually feel like cars, in the run, the cars do have a certain heftiness and weight to them. They stick to the ground and they actually feel like driving a car and not driving an airplane. So that is something I really appreciate, and that is something the team managed to do really well. In fact, the driving model of this game feels a lot like another Need for Speed game that came out the same year, Shift 2 Unleashed, and that was one of the best driving models in Need for Speed till date. That's pretty awesome. And one thing I have to note, that the camera in this game, like when you brake and the camera zooms in or how the camera zooms out, the camera in this game is really spectacular, and it really gives you the feeling of being in an action movie. So as far as the handling and the cars are concerned, to me particularly, I have no issues with them. The game also allows you to replay every single event and every single stage in the game as many times as you want, and I loved going back and using some of the hypercars like the Lamborghini Siesto Elemento and running some of my favorite tracks again. However, because of the engine change, even though the graphics completely hold up, one thing that Black Box weren't able to inscribe in this game are the gadgets from Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. And honestly, this is my complaint with most modern Need for Speed games. Criterion actually found gold with Hot Pursuit when they incorporated all these awesome gadgets like the spike strips and the EMPs. It made driving so much fun, and it also made so much fun to actually battle against the police. But here, it's just generic cop chases, which actually end once you finish the race, since of course each race is its own thing and there is no open world here, so the cops don't follow you into the next race, which is kind of a bummer. Honestly, yeah, the cops are in this game are pretty disappointing. You don't have the gadgets from Hot Pursuit to actually deal with them, and most of the time it's just they do hit hard, the game actually sends a lot of cops to you, and they do hit hard, but honestly they're just a minor nuisance and they don't really actually act as a gameplay element apart from the scripted scenes. But all in all, again, the scripted scenes and the mighty set pieces come in to actually take the grand stage, and they dwarf all the negatives of this game because the scripted events are so damn awesome. And again, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but some of the scripted events, especially the ones where you're just racing down a canyon, are just pretty damn awesome. And speaking of the races, there are basically 4 types of events in this game. The first is when you're racing against a large pack of racers and the goal is to come first. The second are time trials where you have to make up for time which you spend sleeping. The third are basically races against smaller pack of racers which are more elite. And the final is one-on-one head-to-head battles against bosses. All of these races are fun, especially the boss battles. All of the boss battles were memorable to me. They had awesome scripted events, and even though the game doesn't have that much time to develop its villains or its characters, there is a lot of information during the loading screens which you can read and actually connect a bit with the characters, which I found surprising because I never thought that I would actually connect with any characters in just a span of maybe 5 minutes. But that's not the case, and that was a pleasant surprise for me. Due to licensing issues, like most racing games, Need for Speed The Run was delisted back in May 2021 and servers were shut down in August 2021, and the game was no longer up for purchase, though I think you can maybe find some keys or something on some key websites, so you can only play this game if you already own it. But if you do own it, I definitely recommend going back and actually trying this game out again. We don't know how many copies this game sold, so we can't actually tell if it was a financial failure or not, but this was the final game that Black Box Interactive made in the Need for Speed franchise, after which the EA executives actually disbanded the studio. EA has always mismanaged the Need for Speed franchise, and it has always gone from one developer to another. But I think a lot of people were turned off by the 5-hour runtime of this game back when it released, and honestly I can agree. No matter how good, paying $60 for a 5-hour game can be an issue for many people. But I can't help but admire everything that this game has tried to accomplish and everything that this game stands for, because even now, all these years later, there aren't any games, if any, racing games that give you so much real world locations, so much variety and environment design, that too along with so many scripted events in a racing game which are so fun to play. Honestly, this game is really unique and there's nothing quite like it on the market, which is why I wanted to go back and praise it for what it is. So this is my take on Need for Speed The Run 13 years later, now in 2024. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments of what you think about Need for Speed The Run, and if you actually like the game or if you don't like the game. And as always guys, I hope all of you have an amazing day full of positivity and happy gaming.